Good morning, everyone. I'm Hannah Thurman with the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce. We are glad this morning to have Lindsey Lanham with us from Compass Counseling to speak with us about mental health in the pandemic and finding some ways to thrive as individuals, with our families, with our community as we continue to work through this time. So, Lindsey, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'll take just a brief moment to introduce Lindsey to you all with her bio. So Lindsey graduated with a master's degree in mental health counseling from Western Kentucky University in 2008 and has been working directly with children, adolescents, and families for 8 years. Lindsey specializes in working with issues of trauma, crisis, grief, child and adolescent defiance, anxiety, and adjustment to life changes. Other areas of expertise include depression, mood disorders, and ADHD. Lindsey is skilled and has received training in dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, motivational interviewing, and reality therapy, among additional interventions. Lindsey is dedicated to empowering youth and families to promote a life of health, hope, and growth. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Lindsey, and I'll hand things over to you to start this morning's presentation.
All right. Thank you, Hannah. Like she said, I'm Lindsey Lanham, and I'm the owner and I'm a counselor at Compass Counseling. I've been providing mental health counseling for over a decade now. So truly I've been able to witness firsthand, not only in my personal life and through friendships and family, but through my clinical practice, the impact of COVID-19. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. We're going to first run through like the impact and kind of the implications of COVID. And like Hannah said, we're going to address how that impacts the individual and then how that kind of transfers through the family into our communities. And then we'll get into the thriving part. And so I hope to spend most of our time there today. I think it's really important, the application piece. That's always kind of my favorite part of presentations. I know knowledge is so powerful, but I think that the first part of the presentation is probably things that you're already pretty aware of about how we've been impacted thus far. So the thriving piece is really important. So I hope to spend a little bit more time there. I will pause in between the impact and the thriving part, just in case there's any questions. And then, of course, at the end, there will be some time for questions there too. I've also shared my email with Hannah. Anybody's welcome to contact me at any time for any follow-up, or if I can help you get connected with any of the resources, or you need some guidance, I would be happy to do that for you guys. So welcome and happy Friday. And thank you guys for tuning in and I feel like this is some self-care for you guys, for ways to check in on your mental health. And so that's going to be one of the application pieces that we talk about in the thriving part, is making sure that you're checking in, and you've already showed up to do that today. So congrats already. All right, so let's review the impacts. We're going to talk about the individual first. So here you'll see there's been an increase in anxiety and depression. I don't think that this is a surprise for anybody. Anxiety and depression have certainly been on the rise. All of the research and statistics show, and surveys since March of 2020 have showed that there is a significance in anxiety and depression, and it's very present. It creates stress when there's uncertainty. It creates a lot of stress and unknowns. And so then therefore, we can't predict what's going to happen, and that leaves us in a really unsettling place. So the uncertainty drives that. Depression drives that. The pandemic supports and promotes isolation in a way, through quarantines. So, when we were separated from family and friends, that's a really hard time for people. So anxiety and depression certainly on the rise. Something else that we've seen in the impacts is an increased use of substances. So many people who have had a habit before of using substances to cope, we've seen kind of fall back into those habits because the stress was so high. I think also because family conflict was a bit higher too. We were spending a lot of time in our homes with our families, with not as much separation as what we might usually get. And so we saw that family conflict was higher. And then supports, some supports just weren't as accessible and available in the initial phases, especially of COVID. So as supports fall off or fall behind, then relapse, your chances of relapse have increased for sure. So far, anxiety, depression, the use of substances, fatigue and burnout. So we've been talking a lot in the new year about fatigue and how COVID has impacted fatigue. I think a lot of us thought, well, when the new year comes, when 2021 comes, this is going to be better. This is going to feel better. This is going to look different. And while, yes, there is hope and there is change, it's still present. The stress is still present. And so I think many of us, when we get ready for something new or a refresh and the impact of COVID is still present, that's hard and creates a lot of fatigue. So that's in all of us, not just, essential workers and people who are caring for people who are sick, but also for people that just get up every day and COVID still exists. And, it's hard to know, today, tomorrow, next week, next month, when might this feel a little different? Grief. Okay. There's certainly been grief, and that's about like the separation from our family and friends. That's about job loss. That's about the loss and death and serious illness of people we love. So we've definitely seen an increase in grief and grief in just the way that we did life, our day-to-day routines. We grieve the way things were. So we know that these are individual impacts, and I'm going to get to some of the statistics. But we also know that anything that affects us as an individual is going to flow out, right? It's going to in turn impact our families and our communities. So when the individual is not well, families and communities they also suffer. So these are some of the impacts to individuals directly, and then kind of how they overflow to family systems and our communities as well. So just a few individual stats. So this comes from the Kaiser Family Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that provides data on health policies and information for the public. And so what this shows is that I think this data is from January 2021, so very current. A lot of this data was taken from either December 2020 or January 2021. But what this shows is that there's 35.8% of people reporting anxiety symptoms. And that means nearly every day. So it meets like clinical criteria for an anxiety or depressive disorder. So this isn't like I feel anxious some of the time or once a month or once a week. Like this is prevalent anxiety and depression. So anxiety at 35.8%, depression at 28.4%, and anxiety and depression at 41.1%. Okay, this one shows how it differentiates by age group. So this shows that adult ages 18 to 24 reported at 56.2. So over half of our young adult population report anxiety and depression since COVID-19. Ages 25 to 49, 48.9%. Ages 50 to 64, 39.1%. And adults over the age of 65 at 29.3%. And if you'll notice, there's asterisks here. The asterisks represent a significant change in what we saw before COVID. So while those categories, the percentages look lower, it represents that there is significantly more reported anxiety and depression than there was beforehand. We can make some assumptions about why this might be true. I do think that there's a little more freedom, maybe for younger generations to talk about mental health and to feel more free to self-report symptoms. I also think that just developmentally, there's a lot more angst and depressive features that we see in young adulthood, just because, you're kind of emerging and we don't have we don't always have all the experiences to know that, okay, failure is okay, success is okay. So it's kind of an uncertain time anyhow. So you throw a pandemic on top of that, and it's just kind of a breeding ground for anxiety and depression to be on the rise. Okay, so this represents household job loss. So over half of the people surveyed, 53.4%, since March of 2020, report that they have experienced direct job loss within their household, whereas 31.8% report no job loss. Okay, so this is reports by gender for families who have dependents in their home. So if they have children under the age of 18, then this represents them reporting, and again, nearly every day, anxiety and depressive symptoms. And that puts women at 49.3% and men at 40.3%. So the numbers show that women do tend to feel a little bit more responsibility for dependents in their home and managing maybe work and home. And so that stress and responsibility seems to make an increase in anxiety and depression, specifically for both women and men, as you can see by the numbers, but the numbers signify that women just a bit more so than men. Okay, essential and non-essential workers. Now, this data was a bit striking to me, just because, so this shows the percentage of essential workers and non-essential workers and their reports of anxiety and depression, their reports of increased substance use, and their reports of the consideration of suicide. So you can see there 42% versus 30% for anxiety and depression, and 25% versus 11% for the increase in use of substances, and then 22% versus 8% with the consideration of suicide. And I think that that's quite alarming for us to be aware of, that the toll and us being able to handle the pandemic and the jobs and serving others is that we have to take really good care of ourselves. Okay, so families, how are families impacted because of COVID-19? So like I said, we take a look at the individual, but there's definitely a ripple effect. There's a trickle down, there's a transfer in what happens for us and what happens in our family. So if we experience financial hardship and job loss, so then and there does our family. The childcare, I've talked to so many people trying to balance working from home and providing childcare and entertainment and meals and education to children at home. And that's a lot of responsibility and a lot to balance that we weren't necessarily used to before COVID-19. Loss of structure and stability. I can't emphasize enough how important a schedule and a routine is, and rituals for our functioning. And I'll get into that more when we talk about the thriving piece. Structure and stability is so important, and it was just so unpredictable, and things were changing, with hybrid schedules with schools, or work from home or in person, or a combination thereof. So schedules were certainly disrupted. Loss of social supports. We know it takes a village to raise our families, and the village was hard to find during a pandemic. Quarantines promote that as well. We can do that virtually, but the hands-on help, that's difficult to find when we are supposed to be, using social distancing and quarantines to keep us safe. Increased screen time, again, for people that I've talked to in my clinical practice, but also in my personal life and in my own home, we definitely saw an increase of screen time because simply there was just more time at home. And even if you jam packed your day with activities, it just seemed like at some points, screen time was needed, for a break for parents or, just because of boredom and fatigue. So we definitely saw an increase in screen time. Okay, so we've seen the impact with our individuals and how that transfers to the family and then the trickle down to our communities. So what we saw is overstressed systems, right? Our hospitals, our schools, a lot of companies even like being short staffed, or there was a shortage of equipment, supplies that were needed to care for people who were sick. Collective trauma. Okay, so this means that we have experienced the trauma together. So we share some of the same fears. And it also makes our identity a little unstable, right? Like, who are we if things aren't going well, if we're not sure how we're going to function from day to day, who are we as a group? And that's pretty unsettling because we want to feel confident in who we are as an individual, but also as a group. Depressed economy. Again, we've all been affected by a depressed economy and the uncertainty of what that might bring in the next week or years to come, and how that's going to impact our children, and what that just might look like for our overall well-being and how we feel stable, like financially, and how we're going to take care of ourselves. So certainly an impact to our economy. Okay, I'll take just a quick pause. We've gone over the impacts, and now we're going to kind of get to the thriving part. And Hannah, I don't know if do you see any questions, or am I okay to move on?
We do not have any questions at this moment, but please remember, everyone, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so individuals, how do we thrive as individuals during a pandemic? One of the first things that we talk about in practice, and all of this applies to thriving in general. You may note that like during a pandemic, we need to do more of these things. If to be well, I need to exercise 3 times a week. During a pandemic, I may need that more. Same thing with mindfulness or any of these skills that we're going to talk about that we need to remain psychologically well. We just may need those more frequently when stress is high, when depression is high, when there are things outside of our control. So allow strong emotions. This sounds like a basic skill, but we don't all practice this really well. This is simply about giving ourselves permission to feel. Okay, I talk to so many people, and I know I've experienced it myself too, that when an emotion comes up and it's uncomfortable, I want to push it away, right? I want to resist. I don't want to feel that because it's uncomfortable and it might mean something bad, right? So it's important to know that emotions aren't good or bad. Emotions are valid. There's a reason that we, that the emotion comes. So it's important for us first just to give ourselves grace and permission that our emotions are all okay. My emotions don't help or hurt me. Okay, it's my actions and my behaviors that either help or hurt my situation, my wellness, my relationships. So the emotions are all okay. Like, let them come, give yourself permission, and then you can kind of sort through those emotions and see what they're linked to. Is it an interaction? Is it something that I saw on social media? Is it a thought that's really not true? Because we know that our thoughts lie to us sometimes, right? My first, second, third thought sometimes isn't accurate. So I pay really close attention to my thoughts, and I don't believe every thought that I have. I certainly don't say every thought that I have, right? I'm gonna sit with that and sort through that and then kind of decide how that helps or hurts me before I move on. Mindfulness. So mindfulness is about like finding the quiet for me. We have a lot coming in all day long, from the time that we wake up, from the time that we go to bed. I feel like I'm constantly taking information and sensory, like it's all coming in. So being mindful, I think, is just being really intentional about doing one thing. And you can do that through crafts, games, puzzles, cooking, taking a walk, meditation, prayer, yoga. There's a lot of a lot of ways to be mindful, and mindfulness is a daily habit. It's something that I think that we would all benefit from practicing, even if it's 2-3 minutes per day. If you can do more, that's great, but making sure that you just have time to be mindful and to breathe, and just to kind of pay attention to get your mind clear so that we can see and think about things more clearly. Just gives us a little space. Gratitude journaling. So just showing thankfulness and appreciation. Gratitude helps us with positivity. We can literally train our brains to be more positive. So that might start with an affirmation in the morning that says, today's going to be a great day. That might end with what went well today. We don't really want to focus on what didn't go well right before sleep. So it's really important to use those positivity patterns, first thing in the morning and in the evening. And the more that you train yourself to do that, the more that you'll be likely to think more positively rather than negatively. So gratitude and appreciation is really important. Give back. So giving back is really powerful. When things are not within our control, sometimes the best way to manage that is just to put our energy back out. So that means, it might be volunteering, donating our time, donating our money, donating our materials, just giving back with purpose. That can really help us. I think something I heard on a podcast was, it changes us from being helpless to helpful. And that can bring a lot of meaning and purpose, and even control, a sense of control that I'm pushing that energy out, whereas it might not be very helpful if I keep it in. Connect with nature. So connecting is so important. Obviously with nature and with people, connection is key. Connection is the opposite of isolation. And we know that when we're depressed, we tend to isolate, we tend to hide, and we need to do the opposite. So even though I might not feel like it, if I'm depressed, I may not feel like going for a walk. I may not feel like connecting, calling a friend, getting together with family. I know that I'm going to be better if I do. So connection is key. And so connecting with nature just means kind of like using all of your senses. When I'm trying to be intentional about mindfulness, I pay really close attention to my senses. So sight, smell, taste, touch, all of my senses take in whatever the thing is, like you can mindfully eat, you can use essential oils, you can use, materials, comfort blankets, weighted vests, things that soothe you. So just using all 5 of your senses to be mindful and to take things in, and it just creates a little bit of peace and calmness for me to be able to take in more, right? It might be a little break for me to decompress and find some relief and then get back at it. And then I'm able to take more in. Ask for help. Okay, this is hard. Vulnerability is hard. It's hard to say that I'm not okay. It's hard to say it to ourselves, even, let alone to other people, to tell somebody else that I'm not okay. Many of us struggle with that, even to admit to ourselves, to say that I'm not okay. But what we know is when we're able to say that and when we're able to share that, there's relief. There's a relief in accepting help and knowing that I have some direction and knowing that I'm not alone. I think that's important about the pandemic as well, is that we know that we're not alone. No, we don't experience it in the same ways, but we are together. So asking for help is a really, really important step, whether that be through a friend or a family member or somebody you trust. People who ask for support tend to ask for it from people that they think are credible and qualified and smart, right? So the smartest people I know are asking the smartest people they know for help. And I think that's really powerful to think about. And I also heard that seeing support as an opportunity and not a threat. And that was another piece of information or a quote, if you will, that I was like, oh, that could be really useful in reminding ourselves that asking for help is okay. Asking for help is not a threat. It's an opportunity to grow and to be better. Okay, so those are individual ways that I can thrive, thrive anyhow, to thrive with my emotional wellness on a day-to-day, but certainly through a pandemic. And like I said, it might just mean that I need more of those things to thrive well. So family, same thing. So if I'm doing these things individually, I'm going to transfer those things into my family. So we're going to look at schedules and routines. And, we can use some flexibility. It doesn't have to be really rigid schedule and routines. I like to operate from kind of a block schedule. It just means that I know what's going to happen in my day, and it helps me be intentional about what I need. I hear so many people struggle with getting what they need, but sometimes we don't know what we need if we haven't taken a close look. So I encourage you to evaluate what you need often. What are my values? How do I want to live? And make sure that what you're doing day to day matches those values and the way that you want to live. And write these things out. Write them out, talk them out, speak them aloud. We're going to see a lot more change and progress when we put things to paper or we say them out loud rather than like they're just in our head. So make sure that you're writing these things out or that you're saying these things out loud to somebody else. And it just helps you clarify and have more sense over it. So schedule and routine, making sure that that's set up. Again, not rigidness, but we can do that with flexibility. And that's school schedule, family schedule, routines, rituals, anything that's important, whatever your needs are, whether that be work, family, spiritual, our habits in activity, nutrition, and sleep. That's really important. Anytime something feels off or I feel unwell, I'm going to go to activity, sleep, and nutrition first. Those are the basics. It's kind of the foundation of wellness. And if my activity, nutrition, and sleep is where it needs to be, then I can move on to some of these other things. But remember to go back to the basics first. Gratitude activities. So again, I'm going to do these for myself as an individual, but I'm also going to do them as a family. And kids have fun with these types of things. You can Google, activities for families involving gratitude and appreciation. But you can keep a gratitude jar. You can put your names in a hat or a bowl and draw names, and then you do things for each other the following day or the following week, kind of like a Secret Santa type thing. But kids enjoy gratitude activities. And just like I said about individual gratitude and starting my day with today's going to be a great day and affirmations, and then ending my day with what went well, what was the best part of your day. You can do those things at meal times and in the morning and the evening at home with your kiddos or with your spouse or with your mom or, whomever you share your time with. Write letters to loved ones. So creativity, I think, is important, whether that be through music or dance or art. Being able to create and share, that's a really powerful outlet for healing and coping with stress. Zoom meetings with loved ones. I think we all had to experience this more during the pandemic. While Zoom meetings aren't always ideal because we do benefit a bit more from being physically present with one another, it was the best that we could do for a time, right? And that might be for separation for many reasons, not just a global pandemic, but just making sure that you're having contact in some way is really helpful. And people have been really creative with Zoom and Zoom meetings as a group, playing trivia, playing all kinds of board games and Uno and having happy hour across Zoom meetings. So it's a fun and creative way to still interact with one another. Reach out for help when needed again. So even as a family, if I need help, I'm looking to support maybe through my school system, my church, my community, through therapy, through online support groups. So again, families can also seek help and should seek help when they need it. Okay, communities, give back. So it's very important to advocate and to give back. And that might mean donating my time or my resources or financially helping a group function that's going to help our members, right? So communities support back members who need it, and then members put in support to the community. So they work hand in hand. Advocacy, so this means just like supporting policy that helps and promotes families and wellness, and any like overstressed system that might need more support that could give back to our community members is making sure that we're supporting those as well. Make meaning. Change and discomfort are hard, but there's certainly growth to be found. Pain has a purpose, and I think that we are stronger when we endure hard things. We just are. So making meaning out of something that's hard and trying to kind of reframe that so that it feels okay, even if it's difficult. Loss, we do that with grief and loss and things that we don't understand. We find a way to memorialize the person that we lost, or finding ways to make peace with our grief or with our anxiety or with our depression or with change in general. So just finding a way to make this matter and to be better on the other side of it. People say, back to normal. We want to go business as usual. And I don't think that we do, right? The pandemic can teach us how to be better and how to do better and how to be stronger as an individual, how to be stronger as a group, as a family. So it's really important for us to say the beauty, if you want to call it, in the pandemic could be that we learn to do things differently and even better in some ways. So the last slide that I have is about acceptance. So this just kind of makes me think of, everything that we've talked about so far in thriving is within my control. I kind of visualize this circle. And within that circle is everything within my control. Certainly, the pandemic is not within my control. A virus is not within my control, but there are certain things about the virus that I can control, whether that's hand washing or social distancing or quarantine, things that I feel give me peace when it is something that I cannot change. Maybe it's something about my kids' school schedule that I can't control. But again, I circle back to what's within that circle. And then what's outside of that circle kind of leaves me with acceptance, right? So acceptance is the road to all change. You probably heard there's some things that we can tell ourselves with acceptance because there's not a lot of doing there. It's just making peace with the situation. So this too shall pass. I talk about emotions being temporary. Where grace grows, mercy thrives. And we're all just doing the best we can. And, we talk about that a lot too with giving ourselves permission and grace, is that a lot of times I'm just doing the best that I can with the knowledge that I have at the time. So I think the major takeaways from today is to take care of yourself and to be well, to be kind and offer grace and permission for yourself to make mistakes. We all do it. We've all been there. And there's always a day to reset. It does not have to be the beginning of a new year or even the beginning of a new week. But daily and weekly habits are what are going to keep us grounded. So be evaluating kind of how your week went and where you might need more of something or less of something. And that will create, that better balance that kind of helps us all to thrive. So hopefully today you got something that you can take away and use. And that way we can kind of get back at it and keep giving to ourselves and giving to each other. Okay, Hannah, I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Lindsey. And it doesn't look like we have any questions. If anybody has any last minute questions that they would like to ask of Lindsey, please feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat or the Q&A. But we are so grateful for your time this morning, Lindsey. Thank you for sharing the morning with us. I know that I took some notes and just it's good to be reminded of these things and thinking about ways that we can take care of ourselves and our families and our community through these challenging times as we continue through. So thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you would like to rewatch this or share it with anyone, we will be putting this up on the recording of this on our YouTube channel. So be on the lookout for that if you're interested in rewatching or sharing. And it does not look like we have any final questions. So thank you so much, Lindsey, and just wish everyone a great day and a great weekend. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Hannah. You all have a great weekend.